This story was sent to us by a real listener. It happened somewhere in East Asia, maybe in China, Japan, Vietnam, or Korea. They remember it clearly, and after you hear it, you will too. Welcome to Real VNightmare, where real people share the moments they'll never forget. This story was submitted to me by Zhao Emily, the person who experienced it. The river behind the village shimmered under the noon sun, its calm surface hiding the secrets beneath. Zhao Emily had lived her early childhood in Xiangzhou, a quiet district nestled within Guangxi province, where the land was thick with trees, tall grasses and rice paddies that breathed steam in the summer. Back then, the area around Xiangzhou University had not yet been developed. Roads were narrow and flanked by patches of banana trees and dusty fields, and concrete had not yet replaced the soft, shifting earth. Emily's house sat deep within one of those sleepy alleyways down a 12-meter-wide road, past a Y intersection where one path led to the university and the other curved toward Too Old, teacher training schools. Her family lived near the end of the left branch, close to the last house before the open fields. Her childhood friend was Li Anna. Anna's grandmother lived near the elementary school, and the two of them often spent weekends playing by the schoolyard or wandering through overgrown trails that wound behind homes and between stretches of wild hibiscus and bamboo. At the farthest edge of the neighborhood, past a quiet canal and a bridge paved with concrete grates, lay the rice fields. That Sunday, the summer sun scorched overhead, and the streets were nearly empty. Emily asked her mother for permission to visit Anna's grandmother. The girls spent the morning catching crabs and small fish, their laughter echoing through the narrow alleyways. Bored after a while, they decided to wander further toward the field. Anna led the way. They passed the banana grove, reached the Y intersection, and crossed the little concrete bridge. Anna stepped easily over to the other side. When it was Emily's turn, something odd happened. A banana tree trunk, already half submerged and drifting, suddenly wedged itself between the bridge and the bank. For reasons she couldn't explain, Emily hesitated. In her mind, an irrational thought took hold that banana trunk is safer than the concrete bridge. Even though the water had risen and the bridge looked slick but passable, she stepped toward the floating trunk. The moment her foot touched it, the trunk jerked away as if pushed by an unseen hand. Emily lost her balance and plunged into the river. Beneath the water, she sank into thick, suffocating mud. Her legs were trapped. Her sandals had been swallowed by the sludge. Panic took over. She struggled, kicking wildly, but couldn't break free. The river water rose past her neck. She screamed, "Help me, Anna! Help me!" But Anna just stood there staring, frozen. She turned her head left, then right, then left again, as if searching for something invisible. It was as though Anna couldn't see her at all. No one else was around. No one heard her cries. The mud sucked at her feet harder the more she fought it. Emily felt her strength fading, breath faltering. Then a voice, calm and commanding, rang out inside her mind. "Let go of the sandals. Let them go. They will take your place." A strange sense of clarity washed over her. She stopped struggling, pulled her feet free of the trapped sandals, and lunged for the bridge. Her body suddenly felt light, as though the water had let her go. She clambered onto the grates, coughing and shivering. She looked over and saw Anna finally moving her face, a mask of horror. "You were there the whole time. I didn't see anything. I swear I didn't." Emily said nothing. She turned and walked straight home, soaked and trembling. Her mind was numb. At home, she turned on the electric fan, trying to dry her clothes before her parents returned. She knew if they saw her wet, she'd be scolded or worse, punished for sneaking out near the river during flood season. She never told them, nor did Anna. But the experience left something behind. It was as if something had been awakened inside her. Years later, Emily would reflect on the voice in her mind, that calm, protective presence. She had come to believe it was her grandmother who had passed away before Emily was born. No one else in the family looked like their grandmother, but Emily did. Same eyes, same nose, even the mole on the same cheek. Her mother used to tell her about dreams she had during pregnancy dreams, where her mother-in-law would bring her baskets of guavas, her favorite fruit. After Emily was born, those dreams stopped. As Emily grew older, the world around her began to shift. She began to sense things, moods in rooms, flickers of shadows where none should be, the chill of unseen eyes. That near-death moment had left more than a memory. It had opened a door that wouldn't close. Life in Xiangzhou was modest and sometimes harsh, especially in the house where Zhao Emily lived. It was a weathered traditional home, surrounded by overgrown trees and tall weeds that never seemed to thin. The family's home was adjacent to another household that the neighbors whispered about. One said to be harboring something unclean, something unnatural. The adults never spoke of it directly, but children would whisper words like ghost raising or spirit keeping, their eyes wide with fear and fascination. Emily's parents worked hard to raise her, despite their struggles. The land they lived on had once belonged to her maternal grandfather, but after his passing, her uncle tried to claim it all, intending to sell the entire lot and move in with his wife's family. Her mother had no brothers left to defend her rights, and for a while they had nowhere to go. Eventually, with help from the local officials, they secured a small corner of the land where they built a humble hut with a thatched roof. That roof leaked terribly. Emily remembered rainy nights curled up on the only iron-framed bed in the house, its metal. Construction kept it from being soaked through like everything else. Her parents would place pots around the room to catch the dripping water, trying to shield Emily as best they could. The neighbors who now owned the rest of the land were well off, but dismissive. They often played badminton in the yard, and when their shuttlecocks landed on the family's roof, they would use long poles to poke them down, ripping holes in the already fragile thatch. Emily's mother could only sit and cry as the rain poured in. Behind the neighbor's house, there was a tree so tall and dense it blocked sunlight all year round. Nearby stood a dilapidated shed constructed from warped wooden planks. The local children called it the corpse house. At night, adults passing by would report faint groaning sounds coming from inside. Emily didn't believe them, at least not yet. As she grew older, strange things began to happen. By the time she was 10, Emily started noticing the cold. Not the ordinary kind of cold, but a deep, unnatural chill that would spread through her room late at night. Her family had managed to build a second floor by then, and she was given her own bedroom upstairs. Her room was wedged between two staircases, one leading up to the rooftop laundry space, and the other descending to the main living room. From her desk, she could look straight out to the rooftop garden through the window. During the day, the rooftop was pleasant with bonsai trees and orchids basking in the sun. But by night it transformed into something ominous, dark, and heavy. There was an eerie alignment in the house, her bedroom door, the stairs, and the rooftop door all formed a straight line, like a corridor through which something invisible could pass. Emily often stayed up late studying, and during those quiet hours she would feel it. A shift in the air, a sensation not of being watched, but of something passing through. A procession of unseen figures. At first she dismissed it as imagination, but it kept happening. Every night the chill returned, and she'd feel it again, that silent flow of presence, as if a column of spirits moved back and forth, up and down the invisible corridor that ran through her room. Sometimes, she could even sense that a few of them, just one or two, would break from the group and drift into her room. She couldn't see them, but she felt them standing behind her, breathing softly, watching her study. It was the kind of sensation that crept up her spine and wrapped around her neck like ice. Once she tried telling her parents, but they didn't believe in ghosts. They were pragmatic people who believed in doing good and leaving the rest to fate. Her mother would say, "If we live honestly, the ancestors will protect us. Don't talk nonsense." So Emily said nothing more. But the signs continued. The neighbor's shed grew more decrepit, but no one dared tear it down. Rattlesnakes molted their skins in its shadow, hanging dry husks across the iron swing set nearby. Emily's dog would snarl at the shed in the middle of the night, its hackles raised. One day, while she was lying in a hammock reading, the dog barked frantically. She looked up just in time to see a snake slithering through the window and onto her hammocks. "Rope!" Screaming, she leapt to the ground. Fortunately, the dog's barking scared the snake away. Another time, while cleaning her room during summer, she noticed a lizard dart across the floor. When she looked up, she spotted a snake slinking behind the ventilation fan. It was thick, about the size of 2 or 3 adult fingers together. Its scales glinted as it moved. Emily ran downstairs, grabbed an old wooden pole that had once belonged to her grandfather, and returned with trembling hands. She waited until the snake's head came into view, then struck. One clean blow. The creature dropped onto her desk, motionless, its triangular head confirming her worst fears. It had been venomous. If she had missed, she didn't want to think about it. That was when Emily began to suspect that her home wasn't just unlucky. Something was off. The air felt denser than it should. At night, she started having recurring dreams, being chased, being pulled by invisible hands, being watched through the thin walls. Each time she woke, she would find her pillow damp with sweat and her heart pounding. Yet no matter what she experienced, her parents refused to entertain the idea of anything supernatural. They believed in karma, in ancestors, in hard work. But they had no patience for talk of spirits. Emily didn't blame them, but deep down she knew. Something had stayed behind since that day at the river. Something had followed her home. By the time Zhao Emily entered middle school, the presence in her life had grown bolder. What began as vague chills and flickers at the corner of her vision had evolved into physical. Sensations, blankets being pulled, shadows crossing closed doors, whispers that never echoed. Still, she said nothing. It became her normal, even though she knew deep down that it was anything but. When she reached her teenage years, the family completed the second story of the house. Emily's bedroom remained on the upper floor, just beside the main stairwell and directly opposite the rooftop staircase. As before her door, the staircases, and the back door to the rooftop garden, all aligned in a perfectly straight line, like a spiritual pathway through the house. This, she would later learn, was a well-known taboo in feng shui, an open corridor where energy or spirits could flow freely in and out. At night, this pathway became a channel of unease. The rooftop was colder than it should have been, and it never quite felt empty. The iron swing creaked in the breeze even when the air was still. She began hearing the faint scrape of footsteps across the tiles above her room. One night she stayed up late, studying, and nodded off in her chair. She awoke hours later to find herself paralyzed. Her body wouldn't move. She was fully conscious, her eyes open, her heart racing, but her limbs refused to respond. She tried to scream, but no sound came. That's when she felt it. Someone was standing right behind her, Not breathing, not shifting. Just standing, watching. Her skin crawled with the weight of unseen eyes. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but her body remained frozen. A long moment passed. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the paralysis faded. Her limbs trembled with renewed control. She turned, but no one was there. That night she didn't sleep. From then on, she tried not to stay alone in that room, but the strange activity didn't stop. Sometimes she would wake to see her curtains swaying wildly, though the windows were shut tight. Sometimes the scent of burning incense would fill the air, even though no one in the house had lit anything. Years later, during her second year at Shangzhou University of Architecture, Emily met a fellow student named Lou Grace. Grace taught English in the evenings and had a foreign boyfriend, which gave her a flair of sophistication. But what intrigued Emily most was Grace's interest in spiritual matters, especially fortune-telling. Grace often visited a man named Master Q, a reputed seer who lived in District 6, a bustling area on the edge of the city. One weekend, Grace invited Emily to join her for a reading. Curious and perhaps secretly yearning for answers, Emily agreed. That Sunday, they rode 2 scooters across the city and parked near a large bookstore. They walked down a narrow alley and climbed a rickety staircase to a second-floor apartment. The door creaked open before they knocked. A man in his late 30s, dressed in simple linen, greeted them. He looked ordinary at first, but his eyes were sharp, searching. He nodded at Grace, then turned to Emily. "You've brought someone with questions," he said. Inside the apartment was modest. A small shrine to Guan Yin stood near the window, and the air smelled faintly of sandalwood. Master Q lit incense and motioned for them to sit. Grace went first, speaking softly about her future, her relationship, her dreams of living abroad. Emily sat quietly, half listening, heart pounding. When Grace's turn ended, the master turned his gaze to Emily. "You've seen death," he said without prompting. "Not your own, but close. You should have drowned." "Yes." Emily nodded, stunned. "You were spared," he continued. "And ever since then you've carried something with you, a sensitivity, an opening." He studied her hand, tracing the lines across her palm. "You have the markings of someone who could become a master yourself. But the road is painful. The question is, do you wish to walk it?" Emily didn't answer. She didn't know how. All she could think about were the countless nights spent staring into the dark, feeling that presence behind her. Master Q reached beneath the table and produced a small bundle, a yellow talisman wrapped in red thread. "This won't solve your problem," he said, "but it will help you sleep. Put it in your pillow. Let it rest beneath your head." He paused. "And tell your parents to offer a meal to the spirits of the land. Your home is disrupted. Something near you is unclean, not of your doing, but affecting you all the same." Emily thanked him politely, but inside she remained cautious. Was this real? Was it just an elaborate performance? Still, she took the talisman. Later that week, she returned home to Xiangzhou for a short break. She invited Wang Ivy, her close friend from university, to visit for a few days. Ivy was sensitive too, though less openly so. Emily thought perhaps having someone with her would help ease the energy in the house. The first night passed quietly, but on the second, things began to shift. Zhao Emily didn't mention the talisman to her parents, nor to Wang Ivy, at least not at first. The last thing she wanted was to be scolded for superstition. But that second night, as Ivy rolled out a mat beside her bed, Emily quietly unzipped her pillowcase and slid the yellow charm inside. She pressed the pillow down with both hands to secure it, then lay her head on top. Hoping for peace, the night began uneventfully. Ivy fell asleep quickly, but Emily stayed awake. her ears alert to every creak and sigh in the darkened room. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her. She dreamed of nothing. But the next morning, when she reached beneath her pillow, the talisman was gone. Panic rose in her throat. She tore the pillowcase open and flipped the pillow itself. Nothing. Then she spotted it lying just beside the matte yellow paper exposed thread slightly unraveling. There was no way it could have slipped out on its own. She had sealed it inside. She had slept on top of it. Emily said nothing. She simply tucked the talisman back in, this time wrapping it in a piece of cloth and wedging it deeper into the pillow. That night, the same thing happened. The next morning, it was lying in a different spot this time, beneath the edge of Ivy's sleeping mat. On the third night, Emily finally asked casually, "Did you feel anything last night?" Ivy looked up, her expression unusually tense. "I don't know," she said slowly. "I slept really poorly. Something about this room feels not right." Emily nodded but offered no further explanation. That evening, they both felt the air turn heavy. As if a storm was forming, not outside but inside the room. Ivy insisted on moving to the family shrine room to sleep. Emily agreed, partly relieved. That night they slept soundly. But the next evening, back in Emily's room, the unease returned with a vengeance. Just after midnight, Emily awoke with a start. Her limbs were heavy, but she could move barely. Something in the room felt wrong. She turned her head toward the pillow and immediately froze. The talisman was gone again. But not just gone, lying flat on top of the blanket, fully unwrapped. As if someone had carefully unfolded it and placed it where she would see it the moment she opened. Her eyes, her hands trembled as she picked it up. The paper wasn't torn, but it felt colder than it should. She stared at it in silence. A moment later, a sound broke the tension. A voice, just above a whisper. "You're clever, very clever." It came from directly behind her head. She spun around, but no one was there. Ivy was still asleep, her back turned. Emily pressed her palms together, breathing hard. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. But in her heart, she knew the charm had not been rejected. It had been noticed, challenged. The next day, she gathered her courage and asked her parents to hold a proper offering for the spirits of the land. It was nearing the full moon, and the house felt increasingly unsettled. Her parents were skeptical, but agreed. They prepared 3 trays, one for their ancestors, one for the land spirits, and one for the wandering souls. Emily stood beside them as they lit incense and offered prayers. She bowed deeply 3 times and whispered to the air, "Please, let my family be safe. If you must come to me, but leave them alone." The following night, for the first time in a week, the talisman stayed in place. But peace didn't last long. 2 days later, during a brief afternoon nap, Emily fell into a half-sleep, a twilight state where dreams and reality overlapped. As she lay there unmoving, she heard it again, this time clearer, louder, a hissed voice at her ear. "You're strong, too strong. But you called me, didn't you?" Her eyes flew open, but her body refused to move. Something pressed down on her chest, an invisible weight. Her breath grew shallow. The air stank of mold and smoke. Her ears rang. Then, faintly like a breeze from another world, she heard a rooster crow. Just once. And the weight lifted. Emily sat up, drenched in sweat. The talisman lay beneath her elbow, still intact, still threaded, but damp, as if soaked in morning dew. She picked it up gently, then turned to Ivy. "Did you hear anything?" she whispered. Ivy stirred groggily. "No." "Why, nothing," Emily murmured, stuffing the charm back under the pillow. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She began to wonder if the charm had protected her or challenged something darker. Perhaps both. The line between invitation and defense was thinner than she thought. Had she unknowingly allowed something in, that night she folded the talisman once more, whispered an apology into the air, and asked silently, "If I brought you here, I will take you away. Just leave the others be." She had no idea that the real test was yet to come. After that night, Zhao Emily knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. Whatever spirit she had disturbed, it was no longer lingering in the background. It was here, and it was aware. The air in her bedroom had become dense like walking through water. Her dreams turned feverish and vivid shadows peering through doorways. Someone whispering her name from behind the curtains. Cold fingers brushing the edge of her blanket. But she kept her promise. She never mentioned the charm again. She stopped asking questions aloud. And most importantly, she stopped naming it. Wang Ivy, though more composed on the surface, began to act differently as well. She clung to Emily more than usual, followed her everywhere, sat close during meals. Refused to be left alone, even to brush her teeth. Emily's parents noticed and jokingly asked, "Why are you two glued together like this?" But neither girl laughed. The tension in the house reached a peak one afternoon when Ivy, walking toward the stairs, suddenly froze. Her foot hovered mid-step, eyes locked on the banister. Emily turned. "What is it? I felt someone push me," Ivy said softly. From behind. There was no one else upstairs. They sat in silence afterward, neither willing to speak what they feared, that something invisible had brushed past Ivy. Something that didn't want her there. That night, desperate for relief, Emily offered another silent plea. She whispered to the shadows, asking whatever spirit had come to her through the talisman to follow her, and only her. That she would take responsibility for naming it. That she would find a way to end it, but it must not harm Ivy or her family. The oppressive air seemed to lift for a moment, and then came summer. Back at Xiangzhou University, Emily began preparing for her second year. It was time for the school's military training course, a required program for all students. Unlike most universities that scheduled it after the first year, Xiangzhou held theirs in the summer before second year. Students were to gather at dawn at the school gates board buses and head to a remote training facility in the countryside. Emily's group had 9 members, mostly girls from her architecture class. They were assigned to the first bus at 5 a.m. They boarded cheerfully excited about the upcoming experience. Some had heard stories from seniors that the program was physically demanding but fun. They joked, laughed, and shared snacks as the bus pulled away from the city. But somewhere near the outskirts of Suixian, near the old Suishan Scenic Zone, the driver made an unexpected turn. The concrete roads gave way to dirt. Then the dirt grew rough, waterlogged from recent rains. Potholes the size of buckets littered the way. The students fell quiet. By 9:30 a.m., they still hadn't arrived. Someone finally asked Uncle, "Where are we going?" The driver glanced into the mirror. His face was pale. I'm not sure," he said. "This isn't the road I remember." How could that be? Someone whispered. "Haven't they driven this route dozens of times?" Another girl pulled out her phone and called. The class representative. Her voice rose in panic. "What do you mean the second and third buses already arrived?" It became clear they were the only ones lost. The driver, unnerved, reversed into a small side path, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. The bus tilted dangerously before steadying. Everyone on board sat in silence. Emily stared out the window. The forest outside seemed too quiet. No birds, no wind. Just stillness. After several agonizing minutes, they made it back to the main road. The driver parked and stepped outside to smoke, visibly shaken. Another student handed him her phone so he could speak with the instructor. He nodded silently, listening, then finally exhaled. They arrived at the training facility an hour later. Everything was in order. The other groups had settled in. No one else had gotten lost. Only them. And then there was Chen Rachel. Rachel had joined their group last minute and wasn't particularly close with the others. But she had made an impression, stylish, confident, with a kind of dismissive attitude toward anything irrational. That day on the bus, she had been seated near the front earbuds, swaying to her own music. Yet once they arrived, she looked ill, pale, sweaty. She vomited the moment she stepped off the bus violently. Not the kind of car sickness people get from bumpy roads. It was something deeper, gut-wrenching. Emily watched from a distance. Something about Rachel's posture, her eyes felt too familiar. That night, the students were assigned to dormitories. Emily's group shared a room designed for 12. Their group of 9 was joined by 3 girls from another department. Each student claimed a bunk. They chatted, arranged their bags, and joked about ghosts to lighten the mood. Then someone noticed an extra bowl, and chopsticks had been laid out on the table, a 13th set. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It's probably a mistake, someone said, laughing. But Emily didn't laugh. She couldn't. Later, as they finished their meal, someone jokingly said, "Who's the 13th bowl for the ghost of the room?" More laughter. Emily looked around. She didn't know it yet, but that joke, that single sentence, would change everything. At first it was just a joke, the 13th guest, the invisible roommate. Laughter filled the dorm as someone mimicked a spooky voice and joked about locking the door before she came back. No one really meant it, except that someone had said it out loud. And in Zhao Emily's world, that meant something. Words had weight, names had power. By the second day, the joke had taken on a life of its own. "Where's the 13th bowl? Don't forget to leave room for number 13. It became habit-harmless, teasing, casual remarks tossed out into the air. Emily stayed quiet. Then came the dreams. One by one, the girls in the dorm started waking with pale faces, saying they'd dreamt of a woman standing in the middle of the room. The woman never spoke. She just stood there watching, sometimes by the foot of the bed, sometimes crouched in the bathroom, always silent. One girl, one of the 3 newcomers, started sleep-talking. At around 1 a.m., she sat bolt upright in bed and muttered, "Let me go. I want to go to the lake." Her eyes were wide open, her mouth slack. The others froze. Emily, who was already awake, jumped out of bed and grabbed the girl's shoulders. "Who do you want to go with?" she asked. I don't know," the girl said groggily, suddenly blinking. "Why are you shaking me? You don't remember?" She didn't. None of them ever did. The next day, that same girl came down with a fever. She lay curled under her blanket, shivering despite the summer heat. Emily noticed something on her back, 3 long red marks like scratches. Not deep, but fresh. That night, someone heard the bathroom door creak open. No one had gone in. They counted heads. 12. Then who was the figure that just passed by Emily couldn't hold it in anymore? She sat the group down. "We need to stop talking about the 13th person," she said firmly. "Why, it's just a joke," someone said, Chen Rachel, of course. "It's not just a joke if something hears it," Emily replied. "When we talk about someone, when we name them over and over, we invite them in. We make a space for them." Rachel rolled her eyes. "You all believe this nonsense seriously, but others didn't laugh." The scratched girl nodded slowly. The sleep talker whispered, "I don't like the dreams." "I'm not saying it's a ghost," Emily said gently. "But just, for now, can we stop?" Some agreed. Rachel didn't. In fact, that night she did the opposite. Before lights out, she turned to the room and said with mock ceremony, "Dear number 13, you're officially welcome. Sit wherever you like. We'll even leave the light on." Emily went cold. That night, Emily didn't sleep around 2 a.m. The temperature in the room dropped so sharply that she could see her breath. Everyone else was asleep except Ivy, who lay stiff on her bunk, eyes squeezed shut. Then came the sound of dripping. Drip, drip, drip. Emily turned her head. The sound was coming from the bathroom behind the closed door. Drip, drip. Suddenly, a splash. Something had entered the sink basin. Emily rose slowly and stepped toward the door. Her heart thudded with every breath. Just before her hand touched the knob, the door creaked open on its own just a few inches. Enough for a sliver of darkness to spill out. She waited. Nothing moved. No sound. Then gently the faucet turned off. Emily shut the door. The next morning, someone found their toothbrush soaked with blackened water. No one said anything, but the joke stopped, until Rachel laughed again. "Scared of a plumbing issue?" She smirked. "Come on, it's just the pipes. Old buildings, humidity." That day, Emily noticed Rachel's eyes, how dull they looked. Her skin had taken on a gray hue. She didn't complain, but she flinched when anyone touched her shoulder. That night, the dorm grew colder than ever. At 3 a.m., the girl on the top bunk closest to the bathroom screamed. Everyone jolted awake. What happened? I saw her," the girl sobbed. She was climbing up the ladder. Who the 13th girl? No one spoke. Emily turned to Rachel, whose bed was untouched. She was already sitting up awake, watching. "You saw it too?" Emily asked. Rachel didn't respond. Her gaze was fixed on the dark bathroom door. The following day, Emily pulled Ivy aside. "We need to do something." Ivy nodded. "I've been thinking about it too." Together they prepared a small offering breadfruit incense. They waited until the afternoon when most of the others were out at drills. In the corner of the dorm, they placed the offering near the window. Emily lit the incense and knelt. She whispered, "We're sorry. We called you. We spoke your name. We mocked your presence. If you're here, and if you're lost, please go. You don't belong here." The incense curled upward. A breeze blew through the room. The flame flickered once, then steadied. They left the incense burning until it was gone. That night no one dreamed, no faucets dripped, no cold breath. But Rachel didn't speak to anyone the entire day. She just sat on her bunk, staring into space, like something had taken root inside her. The days rolled forward, but tension lingered in the air like a fog no one could disperse. Even though the 13th person was no longer named aloud, everyone in the dormitory felt her presence. And Chen Rachel, who once mocked the idea, had grown quieter. Her vibrant personality drained into a dull, sunken version of itself. Her eyes no longer held their defiance. They were bloodshot and hollow with heavy bruising under the sockets. She no longer joined drills with enthusiasm, and the staff assumed she was suffering from heat stroke or exhaustion. But Emily and Wang Ivy knew better. At night, Rachel tossed in her sleep. Once Ivy saw her sitting up, murmuring into the air. Not in her own voice, but something raspy, guttural. The rest of the girls avoided her. No one dared bring up what they all suspected. Instead, they went through the motions wake train, eat, sleep. But the air was stifling. The food spoiled faster than it should. Bottled water turned sour overnight. Even instant noodles still sealed tasted wrong by morning. Then there was the girl on the upper bunk near the bathroom, the devout Catholic. She had always been shy and soft-spoken, often clutching a rosary at bedtime. One morning she awoke with red welts on her back. Ivy helped her apply herbal ointment, and as she rubbed it in, she gasped. The bruises had formed a cross. A perfect one. A cold silence fell over the group. That's it, Emily whispered that night. We need to make things right, before it gets worse. But Rachel, perched on her bed, finally spoke again. You all are being ridiculous, she snapped, though her voice trembled. There's no ghost. There's no 13th person. You're just scaring yourselves. Emily turned to her gently. You don't believe that anymore. Rachel's gaze flickered, then hardened. Even if there is something, so what? It hasn't touched me. Emily and Ivy exchanged a look. The others remained silent. That night, the wind returned hot and dry, like a furnace had opened behind the bathroom door. The air conditioner malfunctioned. The bathroom light flickered. And just after midnight, the faucet turned on by itself, full blast. Water gushed as if someone were angrily washing hands. The Catholic girl whimpered in her sleep. Ivy stirred, clutching her blanket. Emily rose quietly, walked to the bathroom, and turned off the tap. She whispered, We're sorry. Then she looked down. There were 13 toothbrushes in the cup. Only 12 girls lived there. The next morning, Emily didn't mention what she saw. She couldn't bear to, but she made a decision. That night, she turned to the empty air and spoke softly. I was the first to call you. If you're still here, come with me. When this training ends, follow me. I'll bring you to peace. I promise. Then she closed her eyes and repeated the words over and over. Days passed. Rachel's condition worsened. Her hair thinned, her appetite vanished. She would sit alone for hours, tracing circles into her notebook with a trembling pen. Emily knew the spirit had found her, and the more Rachel denied it, the deeper it clung. During their third week of training, while the others showered in pairs and groups, Rachel began avoiding the bathrooms altogether. She didn't wash. She didn't change clothes. She claimed she wasn't feeling well, but Emily suspected another reason she was afraid to be alone. One evening, Emily and Ivy returned early from drills to find Rachel huddled on the floor of the dorm, whispering to the open bathroom door. I didn't mean to, she said. I was just playing. I didn't know you'd come. Emily froze. Rachel, she called gently. Rachel turned. Her face was wet, not from tears, but from sweat. Her eyes were wild. She's angry, she said. She says I named her. She says, now I'm responsible. You're not alone, Emily said quickly. I'll help you. But Rachel shook her head. It's too late. She's inside now. I feel her. That night, Rachel finally slept, but her dreams were not silent. She murmured in her sleep, muttering names none of them recognized, in a dialect that didn't match their own. The following morning, her pillow was damp, and a single red thread, like the one from Emily's talisman, lay beside it. But Emily had never shown that charm to anyone, not even Ivy. Something or someone had brought it back. By the final days of the training camp, the atmosphere in the dorm had shifted completely. No one laughed. No one made jokes. Even the instructors noticed how subdued the girls had become. When they lined up to return to the university, the dorm was eerily clean, almost too clean. All signs of disorder had been erased. No forgotten shoes, no discarded wrappers. The toothbrush cup was empty again. As the girls loaded their belongings onto the bus, Emily turned one last time to look at the dormitory building. In a single window, just for a moment, a silhouette stood. Not waving, not moving, just watching. She said nothing. Instead, once back in Xiangzhou, she called Wang Ivy and told her they had one last stop to make. A promise is a promise, she said. And so 2 days later, the girls set out together to fulfill it. Zhao Emily didn't take Ivy back to the university immediately. Instead, they boarded a small regional bus heading southwest toward the rural outskirts of Lingnan. a sleepy district known for its old temples and quiet hillsides. Along the way, Emily explained everything. The river accident, the talisman, the voice she heard beneath the water, the dreams, the 13th toothbrush, and the unspoken deal she made with the spirit. "I promised I'd take her somewhere peaceful," she said, voice low. "Somewhere away from all of us. Somewhere she won't be called again." Ivy listened silently, hands clutching her bag. She didn't interrupt. She didn't scoff. She simply nodded and said, "Okay, let's do it." They arrived just before sunset. Lingnan was wrapped in golden light, the kind that casts long shadows and makes even the trees look ancient. Emily led Ivy down a narrow dirt path behind an abandoned railway station, where an old temple once stood. It was nothing more than a stone platform, now ringed by cracked statues and overgrown weeds. But the energy was different here, calmer, as if the land itself held a kind of jenya, a protective warding. Jenya, a ritual or method used to spiritually suppress or seal off harmful forces, believed to prevent them from spreading or returning. They carried with them a simple offering rice incense, a paper lotus boat, and a small candle. Emily placed the paper boat on the surface of a still pond beside the temple ruins and lit the candle inside. To the quiet air, she whispered, "I called you, I named you. And I carry the fault of that. But now I set you free." The flame danced gently in the growing dusk. The boat floated to the center of the pond, circling slowly. Ivy stood beside her, silent and solemn. Then the wind picked up, just a soft breath of air, not sharp or cold, but warm, like someone sighing in relief. The candle flickered and stayed lit. Emily didn't cry, but something inside her loosened. That night, they slept at a small inn run by an elderly couple who gave them tea and said nothing about the incense on their breath or the faint smell of burned paper on their clothes. By morning, the sky was clear. When they returned to Xiangzhou, everything felt lighter. Emily resumed her classes. Ivy, too. The dreams stopped. The scratches faded. And the 13th toothbrush never appeared again. But Chen Rachel never came back. She left a week after the training ended, citing family issues. She never said goodbye. Her number on group chat went inactive. No one could reach her. Emily didn't press. She knew some doors once opened can't be closed again. Over time, life returned to normal, at least outwardly. But Emily had changed. She still kept the yellow talisman wrapped in cloth and hidden in the drawer beside her bed. She never used it again. But she didn't throw it away either. Sometimes late at night, she would sit on a rooftop and light a single stick of incense, not to ward off spirits, but to honor the girl she had unknowingly invited, the one no one should have named. 6 months later, in the middle of winter, Emily was returning from the university library when she noticed something strange. At the gate of her apartment complex, tied to the low branch of a hibiscus tree, was a red string. Just a simple red thread knotted loosely in a loop. Her breath caught. No one else noticed it. But to her it was unmistakable. The same kind of thread that once wrapped the talisman. The same kind of thread that lay beside Rachel's pillow. Emily didn't touch it. She simply bowed once to the tree, walked past, and locked her door behind her. That night she dreamed not of spirits or shadows, but of a girl in a white dress, standing in a field beneath a blood-red sky. The girl didn't speak. She just turned, walked away, and vanished into the light. Emily woke with tears in her eyes and whispered only once more, "I will never call your name." Again. Winter gave way to spring, and Zhao Emily quietly slipped back into the rhythm of student life, lectures, presentations. Sleepless nights drafting floor plans, Most of her classmates had forgotten about the strange events during the military training. Even Ivy, though still close to Emily, rarely brought it up. It was safer that way. But Emily hadn't forgotten. She carried it not as trauma, but as a responsibility. It was during a seminar on architectural symbolism that something stirred her memory. The lecturer spoke of liminal spaces thresholds where energy changes. Hallways, doorways, staircases, places between places. The perfect environment, he said, for both transformation and disruption. Emily stared at the diagram projected on the screen. A floor plan, simple. Bedroom door aligned directly with a staircase. Beyond that, a rooftop entrance. Perfect symmetry. She nearly laughed. It was her house. Her childhood home in Xiangzhou had been a textbook example of a spiritual corridor. No protective barrier, no intentional break in flow. And it dawned on her what she had felt all those years ago wasn't coincidence. It wasn't imagination, it was structure. It was design, and it had consequences. After class, she returned to her dorm and pulled out an old notebook. Inside were hand-drawn sketches from her high school years. Her bedroom, the rooftop garden, the back shed that once stood beyond the fence. She began drawing corrections not for beauty or efficiency, but for containment. She added staggered walls, adjusted the stairs. Imagined new angles for energy to break and redirect. By midnight, her desk was full of revised blueprints, not for a real project, but for something else entirely. A house that protects, she murmured. A house that listens. That summer, Emily visited Ivy's hometown in Qinghe, a misty valley town nestled against forested hills. Ivy's family welcomed her warmly, and for the first few days it felt like a true escape. The village was old, steeped in stories passed down for generations. Folk rituals, ancestral offerings, and whispered superstitions still held sway. One evening, while helping Ivy's grandmother clean the attic, Emily found a box filled with old charms, folded talismans, bone beads, and an ornate hairpin carved with ancient characters. Ivy's grandmother saw her holding it and smiled. "That belonged to my mother," she said. "She used it when she warded the house during the Hungry Ghost Festival," warded Emily asked. "Zhenya," the old woman said, eyes narrowing knowingly. Zhenya, a spiritual practice to suppress wandering souls and keep harmful energy from entering. Emily nodded slowly. She spent the rest of the evening listening as Ivy's grandmother told stories of how one must never call the names of the dead after midnight, of how certain numbers draw spirits, and how paper effigies must always be burned completely lest they wander back. As she listened, Emily realized something. The spirit they'd encountered during training the 13th girl may not have meant to harm them at first. She had come because she was invited, named, joked about, called again and again. And once a spirit is called, it arrives. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. What happened during that summer wasn't a haunting, it was a summons, and they had summoned her. Emily returned to Xiangzhou with new resolve. She joined a student research group focused on traditional East Asian architecture, particularly the use of spatial design in temples and ancestral homes. The group often visited heritage sites, studying feng shui applications in rural villages, observing how homes were built to ward off misfortune. She kept her thoughts to herself, but her designs began shifting. Less modern glass and steel. More earthstone curves and interruption lines, flow breaking. One professor noticed. "You're building for people who are afraid," he remarked once. "No," Emily replied gently. "I'm building for people who know." One day as she was reorganizing her dorm shelf, She found the paper talisman, again the original one given to her by Master Q. Its corners were faded, the red thread frayed. She looked at it for a long time. Then, instead of hiding it again, she placed it carefully inside a small wooden box, lined with cotton, and tucked it into the bottom drawer of her desk. Not out of fear, but respect. That evening, she lit a single stick of incense and placed it on her windowsill. She didn't say any names. She didn't make any calls. She just sat in silence, letting the smoke rise into the sky. And for the first time in many months, she truly felt alone. In the best way. No chills. No whispers. No shadows. Just her. And the sound of the world turning quietly around her. Time passed as it always does. Zhao Emily graduated from Xiangzhou University with high honors. Her final thesis, titled Transitional Architecture and the Spirit of Space, earning praise from multiple faculty members. She was offered an internship in the city, but chose instead to return home to the old house where it had all started. Her parents welcomed her back, warmly proud of her achievements. The house itself looked the same from the outside. Same clay-tiled roof, same weathered walls, same rooftop swing that still creaked in the breeze, but inside things had shifted. Emily noticed it immediately. The energy was calmer. Still yes, but not heavy. Her old room, though unchanged in furniture, felt lighter. Even the corridor that once served as a spiritual funnel seemed gentler, as if the sharpness of its angles had dulled. She asked her mother casually, "Did you ever make any changes to the house?" Her mother shrugged. "Just small things. We added a wind chime, put up a mirror near the stairs. Oh, and the neighbor said placing a ceramic frog near the back door helps redirect bad energy." Emily smiled faintly. Even without knowing the theory, her mother had made quiet corrections, small gestures that aligned with centuries of wisdom. That evening, Emily wandered up to the rooftop. The swing was still there, but rusted now, motionless. She ran her fingers along the frame, remembering sleepless nights, invisible watchers, and that strange voice that once whispered to her from the dark. She lit a stick of incense and set it in a ceramic holder. Then she sat listening. No voices, no footsteps, just the wind brushing through the bamboo fence her father had installed. Then quietly the swing moved, not violently, but gently swaying once, then stopping. Emily didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "I know," she whispered. "I remember." She didn't need to know whether it was real or just wind. What mattered was the memory and the promise she had made. In the following months, Emily began working with a small architectural firm focused on restoring rural homes across southern Guangxi. Her designs prioritized spiritual balance, blending old superstitions with modern needs. Clients didn't always understand the principles, but they felt the difference. One elderly couple, after moving into their renovated home, told her, "We sleep better now. The house feels kind." That was enough. Emily never claimed to be a spiritual expert. She didn't dress in robes or chant ancient prayers, but in her work she built channels of safety, homes that whispered, "You're safe here." And yet, on certain nights, especially around the lunar 7th month, she would still light incense at her window and speak into the quiet. She never said the name. She never spoke of the 13th girl. But her mind always returned to that summer, that dorm room. That moment when a joke became a doorway. She would remember Chen Rachel's blank gaze, the extra toothbrush, the bruised cross on the Catholic girl's back, the scraped floorboards by the bathroom door. She would remember how easy it was to summon something with words, how carelessly people speak, not knowing what listens. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled over Xiangzhou, Emily received a message from Wang Ivy. "Hey, remember when we promised never to talk about her again? Something weird happened." Emily's fingers hovered over the screen. Ivy sent a photo. It was of her apartment sink. Water had overflowed, and inside the basin, floating gently, was a strip of yellowed paper burned at the edges. Emily closed her eyes. "She's still wandering," she whispered. She dialed Ivy immediately. "Don't say anything she said. Not her name. Not what we called her. Don't repeat it. Just listen." She instructed Ivy to dry the paper, fold it 3 times, wrap it in white cloth, and place it in the highest drawer of her apartment away from mirrors and water. Then she said, "You didn't call her. Someone else did. She's just passing through." "I'm scared," Ivy admitted. "I know," Emily said softly, "but you're not alone." They ended the call. Emily walked to her incense box and lit another stick. Smoke curled toward the ceiling like a quiet signal part offering part warning. She stepped outside onto her rooftop again. And from the far corner where the swing once stood, she heard it just once. A soft breath of laughter, gone before she could react. She smiled sadly. "I didn't call you," she said into the night, "but I remember you." She let the incense burn down to ash, and the rooftop fell silent once more. Spring faded into another summer. By now, Zhao Emily had earned a quiet reputation, not just as a skilled young architect, but as someone who understood old houses. Clients from small towns and villages would come to her not just with design requests, but with concerns that whispered between the lines, "My son won't sleep in his room. The kitchen light turns on by itself. The baby cries only when the window faces east." She never advertised herself as anything more than a designer, but word spread especially among the old who knew how to read silences. One morning, a man in his 50s arrived at the firm's office in Xiangzhou, holding a faded photograph and a bamboo scroll tied with red string. "This was my grandmother's home," he said, unrolling the scroll. "No one's lived there in decades. But we can't sell it. Every buyer walks away." Emily examined the photo. The house was small, set against the edge of a mountain forest. One window was bricked up. A large ceramic urn stood beside the threshold. "Did anyone die inside?" she asked gently. The man hesitated. "My aunt." But not in the usual way. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Emily agreed to visit. The village of MacLeod was hidden among terraced fields and mist-covered ridges. The air felt old, like every tree had heard 1,000 secrets and promised never to tell. The house stood just as in the photo, quiet, brittle, leaning slightly toward the trees. As Emily stepped inside, her shoes crunched on old soil. The floor was earthen, the air thick with mildew. But it wasn't the smell that caught her attention. It was the feeling. That same tight pressure in her chest, that pause in the wind. The doorway had no threshold. The back room had a mirror facing the bed. And worst of all, the bricked-up window was cracked, just a sliver. Enough for something to pass. She turned to the man. "Don't enter after dusk," she said. "And don't ever sleep here. Not yet." He nodded, pale. Emily spent the next 3 days redesigning the flow, adjusting openings, sealing the window completely, moving the bed to face the door at an angle, installing a narrow water basin at the foot of the stairs. At the very end, she placed a bowl of dry rice and a bundle of salt wrapped in red cloth near the urn outside. Only then did she step back. On her last night in MacLeod, she slept at the local inn. Just before dawn, she dreamed of a woman in white standing beside the urn. The woman bowed and vanished. When Emily awoke, her phone had a single new message. "You're safe now." There was no sender. Back in Xiangzhou, life continued. The urban buzz never truly reached her rooftop. Each evening she sat with a cup of tea, watching the city glow against the mountains. Sometimes she thought of Ivy. They still spoke, though less frequently. Ivy had taken a job in public health, far from the ghost-stirring halls of college dorms. She kept incense in her drawer now, and salt near her door. Sometimes Emily thought of Rachel. No one ever found her. Her student record remained frozen. Her belongings returned to her hometown. Her parents claimed she'd transferred abroad, but no one knew which country, which school, which language she now spoke. Some whispered she had gone mad. Some said she had become someone else entirely. Emily didn't speculate. She simply remembered. On the anniversary of the 13th Bowl incident, Emily returned to the training facility not officially, but as a visitor. The dormitories were now used for new student programs, but she stood outside the old building, gazing up at the window that once held a shadow. She brought no incense this time, just stood in silence, until a voice broke it. "You're the one who asked her to follow you, aren't you?" Emily turned. A maintenance worker, an older woman sweeping leaves, stood nearby. "I saw you years ago," the woman said. "You came out crying. You were the only one who bowed when you left." Emily nodded. The woman said nothing more, just resumed sweeping. Emily walked back to the main gate slowly, her fingers brushing the talisman in her coat pocket. Still whole, still warm. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, she whispered not a name, but a promise you are not forgotten. Zhao Emily's name began circulating in quiet circles, not among celebrities or news headlines, but among those who believed in things they couldn't see. Her clients rarely asked direct questions. Instead, they told stories about cold air in empty rooms, about dreams that always ended at the same staircase, about a child who refused to enter one corner of the house, and Emily listened. She never promised to solve everything, only to adjust the space, to make it safe, and more importantly, to make it respectful. It was during one such consultation in Shancheng, an old river town near the border, that she encountered a case that felt different. The home was new, built only 5 years ago. But the family had already suffered 3 tragedies. A mother-in-law died in her sleep. An uncle fell from the rooftop, and the youngest daughter nearly drowned in an indoor water tank. The father, a rational man, had reached his breaking point. "I don't believe in ghosts," he said, voice tight. "But I can't explain any of this." Emily didn't argue. She walked through the house slowly. Then she stopped at the main hallway. There, hung at eye level, was a large ancestral portrait framed in redwood and glass. 13 figures. 13. Emily's fingers tingled. "When did this painting go up?" she asked. The man hesitated. 2 years ago, after the first funeral." Emily looked closer. The 13th figure standing at the edge was blurred. Not by time or damage, but as if something in the image had never been fully there. "Do you know all of them?" He shook his head. "Only the first 10. The last few were added by the artist for symmetry. My wife thought it looked better." "Did you give them names?" "No," he said. "But my daughter, she named one." Emily's heart skipped. "Which one?" He pointed directly at the 13th figure. She called her auntie with no eyes, said she stood in her room sometimes. Emily closed her eyes. It had happened again. That evening, Emily stayed longer than usual. She asked to see the daughter's room, the rooftop, even the storage shed. At every step, she saw signs subtle but real. Piling energy. Misplaced flow. Places where names had been spoken carelessly. She made adjustments. Suggested removing the painting. Salt beneath thresholds. Red thread near the attic ladder. A small mirror behind the stove. Nothing elaborate. But when she stepped outside, the wind that greeted her was still. Not hostile, just curious. That night back at her guest house, Emily sat cross-legged with her journal open. She drew the hallway, the painting, the positions of the figures. And at the edge of the page, she wrote, "It's always the 13th. Not the first. Not the middle. The forgotten one. The added one. The one without a name until someone gives it." She recalled the talisman, the red thread, the incense, the bowl. She recalled the phrase that had haunted her since her second year of university, "Don't call." Their name, because calling is inviting. 2 weeks later, she received a message from the family in Shancheng. No more footsteps. No more water sounds. She doesn't talk about the auntie anymore. "Thank you." Emily read it in silence. She didn't reply. Instead, she closed her notebook and walked out to the small courtyard of the guest house. There, under a tree, hung with paper charms from other travelers, she tied a single knot of red thread around a twig. A silent message, a boundary, a remembrance. When she returned to Xiangzhou, the rainy season had begun. Water pooled in the alleys and rooftops shimmered with mist. She took long walks under her umbrella, watching the city transform into something ancient and reflective. In one shop window, she saw a mirror framed in black lacquer. And in the reflection, just for a second, she thought she saw 13 bowls, stacked neatly, waiting. She didn't go inside. She didn't panic. She simply whispered under her breath, "I see you, but I won't call you." And she walked on. The mirror's reflection faded with the rain. Summer gave way to autumn, and the streets of Xiangzhou turned golden with falling leaves. Zhao Emily, now living in a quiet apartment near the edge of the old district, had turned part of her home into a design studio. Clients came and went, teachers, retirees, young couples, but occasionally, she'd find herself facing someone different. Like the girl who came with her aunt, silent and thin, clutching a bundle of white fabric. She never spoke, but when Emily asked gently, "Is there someone following you?" the girl's eyes filled with tears. Or the businessman who claimed his new house never stayed warm, no matter how many renovations he made. When Emily asked what stood on the land before he hesitated, then admitted a crematorium. But it's been demolished for years. Emily never asked for proof. She didn't need it. Some things left traces. One evening while sorting through her bookshelf, Emily found an envelope with no name. Inside was a faded photograph, her old dormitory during the training camp. It must have been taken by someone else. The shot showed the 12 girls arms around each other, laughing. All 12 were visible. But there at the far end of the photo, partially cut off, was a pale blur. Emily held it close to the light. It wasn't a glitch. The figure had shape. Long hair. A shoulder tilted forward, no features. She hadn't seen it before. She hadn't remembered this photo existed. She didn't even know who had taken it. She set it aside, heart steady. Later that night, she met Wang Ivy for dinner. They spoke of normal things, deadlines, books, dating, disasters. But near the end of the meal, Ivy leaned in. "Do you ever wonder if we didn't do enough?" Emily paused. "You mean for her?" Ivy nodded. "I've stopped wondering," Emily said quietly. "We did what we could, what we knew to do. But she still appears, still follows others." Emily looked down at her tea. The steam rose slowly, curling like memory. "She appears because people still name her," she said. "It's never just about one time. She's become an echo, a caution, a lesson." "And what lesson is that?" Ivy asked softly. "Some names are meant to stay unspoken." They parted in the drizzle, Ivy disappearing into a waiting taxi. Emily walked home alone, her umbrella tapping softly as she moved through the old quarter. She passed shuttered storefronts, temple gates, and lampposts flickering against the mist. As she neared her apartment, she saw it. On the ground just beside her doorstep. A 13th Bowl, ceramic, plain, perfect. Emily stopped. No one else was around. She bent slowly, picked it up, and turned it over. No cracks, no chips. Just a faint mark inside one she couldn't read. She carried it into the house, rinsed it in warm water, and set it quietly on her shelf. She would not return it to the street, but she would not use it either. It was not hers to break. That night she lit incense as she always did. One stick. No prayers. Just breath and silence. And when she slept, she dreamed a field. A girl in white standing in tall grass. This time the girl turned, and for the first time had a face. She was not angry, not mournful, just tired. Emily stepped closer in the dream. The girl opened her mouth, no sound came. But Emily understood. You've carried me long enough. Then the girl turned, walked toward the horizon, and vanished into wind. Emily woke with tears on her cheeks. She whispered thank you, and outside the bowl remained still on the shelf. As the months passed, the 13th Bowl remained exactly where Emily had placed it, untouched on the wooden shelf above. Her small altar. She never moved it, never used it, never explained it to guests. It became a quiet marker, like a bookmark in a chapter that had not yet ended. By then, Emily had learned how to live among the unseen. She didn't fear spirits. She didn't chase them away. She acknowledged them and then gently encouraged them to rest. But one autumn evening, a call came that made her heart skip. It was from an unknown number, though the voice on the other end was unmistakable. Emily, it's Rachel. Emily froze. Chen, Rachel. A pause. Yes. The voice was raspier, thinner, like wind caught in reeds. There was no emotion in it. Just distance. Where are you? Another pause. I don't know. Somewhere cold. I keep trying to wake up, but I don't think I'm dreaming. Emily gripped the phone harder. How did you get this number? I don't remember. Silence stretched. Then Rachel whispered, Do you still have it? Emily's breath hitched. The bowl. No. The name. Emily closed her eyes. No one says it anymore? I didn't mean to call her Rachel, said suddenly, voice cracking. It was a joke. I thought it would be funny, but then... She started answering. Rachel, listen to me, Emily said firmly, heart pounding. You can leave. You don't have to stay there. Wherever you are, don't speak. Don't name her, just walk away. I tried, Rachel whispered. She follows. Then stop looking back. Silence. Then the line went dead. Emily stared at the screen for a long time. No number. No trace. Nothing saved in call history. She lit 3 sticks of incense that night. She didn't say a word. Over the next week, she kept the incense burning daily. Always 3 sticks. 1 for Rachel. 1 for the nameless. 1 for herself. Nothing strange happened. No knocks, no whispers. No dreams until the 7th night. She awoke at 3 Huzuru a.m., sitting bolt upright. The incense had long burned out. But on the windowsill, placed carefully beside the candle holder, was the red thread. Not the one from before. A new one, shorter, looser, unfinished. Emily stood cradled it in her palm. She felt no fear, just a deep, aching sadness. The next day she traveled, not to a temple, not to a shrine, but to the old military camp where it all began. It had changed, converted into a training ground for junior cadets. But the dorm building still stood. Same peeling paint, same iron stair rails. Same third-floor window that once reflected shadows. She spoke to a guard, said she was there for research. He waved her through. Inside the old dorm, room 305 had been emptied of bunks. The floor was freshly waxed. But Emily walked to the back corner, the one near the bathroom door, and knelt. She took out the red thread and the talisman from her coat pocket. "I release you," she whispered. "I carry your name no longer." She folded the talisman into the thread and tucked it into the space behind the loose wall panel. She'd remembered from years ago. Then she lit a match, burned a slip of joss paper, and let the smoke rise toward the ceiling. When she stood, the air felt thinner, lighter. She didn't look back. On her way out, the guard called after her. "Hey, miss!" She turned. "Something weird happened a few nights ago," he said. "Cameras picked up a girl walking down the hallway, but there's no one registered on that floor." Emily nodded. "She's gone now." The guard blinked. "You sure?" Emily smiled faintly. No one's called her since, and that she thought was what mattered most. The winter that followed was unusually quiet in Xiangzhou. The rain arrived early, washing the streets in soft gray light. Zhao Emily stayed indoors, more finishing drafts and answering emails by a small desk lamp. The 13th Bowl always in her periphery. She no longer lit incense out of fear. It had become habit, an act of gratitude, a way of saying thank you for the silence. Then, on the eve of the Lunar New Year, she received a letter. Not an email, not a message. A real letter. The envelope bore no sender. Inside was a sheet of rice paper folded 3 times. The handwriting was precise and thin, as if inked with care by someone who hadn't written in years. "I found a place. There are no mirrors, no numbers, no voices calling in the night. Thank you for not forgetting me. R." Emily stared at the signature for a long time. Rachel. It wasn't possible. Not in any conventional way. But she didn't doubt it. Not after everything. She folded the letter, placed it beside the talisman box, and lit a single candle. This time no incense, just flame, pure and silent. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself cry not out of fear or grief, but because something unresolved had finally begun to rest. Spring arrived early. Plum blossoms opened along the garden wall. The city felt washed clean. Emily's business grew, but she never expanded beyond what she could personally handle. She didn't want to forget the details, the small homes, the quiet clients, the whispered stories. She kept building safe places. Places where no one would call to the dark out of boredom or mockery. Places where if something came, it would be seen and understood and gently let go. One rainy afternoon, she visited her old university for an alumni event. The architecture building was nearly the same. But as she wandered the halls, she overheard 2 younger students whispering behind her. "Did you hear about the dorm ghost? The one with the bowl?" Emily kept walking. "Yeah, but that's just an urban legend." "Right. Still, they say if you see 13 of anything in your room, you're supposed to leave 1 outside. Why? Because if you don't, one of them might not leave." Emily smiled softly. The story had changed, evolved, shifted into warning. Not about fear, but about respect. That was enough. On her way home, she stopped by the riverbank, the same place where her journey had begun years ago. When the water had churned and the voice had whispered. The river was calm now. The trees leaned gently over its surface. She took a seat on a mossy bench and watched the current flow. From her coat pocket, she pulled a folded piece of joss paper. No name written on it. Just a single line: some doors should remain closed, some voices should not be echoed. She lit it, watched it curl and vanish into the wind. Then she rose and walked away. She never turned back. That evening, she removed the 13th bowl from her shelf. She didn't break it. She didn't bury it. She simply placed it inside a wooden box wrapped in red silk and tucked it into the far corner of her closet. And as she turned off the lights, she whispered into the quiet, "You've been seen. You've been heard. You've been remembered." And for the first time, she no longer felt followed. She felt accompanied, not haunted, held. So now, dear listener, as we slowly step back from this story, let's take a breath together. What began as a tale of laughter and training drills of summer heat and harmless games quietly unfolded into something much deeper, a story not just of spirits, but of responsibility, of memory, of the weight that names can carry, especially when spoken without care. Zhao Emily wasn't a priestess. She wasn't born into rituals or temples. She was just a girl who saw something and chose not to ignore it. And maybe that's what makes her journey so unforgettable. She didn't chase ghosts. She honored them. And when the past tried to reach through mirrors, bowls, and broken voices, she faced it not with fear, but with stillness. In her silence, she showed us that not all hauntings need to end with exorcism. Some need only an apology, a light, a bowl never touched, and a promise never to name again. So tonight, if you feel a breeze move through your room, if you find a thread where none should be or see one bowl too many, don't panic. Just remember what Emily taught us. Respect matters. Memory matters. And sometimes the truest protection isn't a charm. It's a promise kept. Now let the incense burn low, let the fan hum gently, and let the shadows fall where they may. We'll see you next time. But remember, the horror stories of the East never truly end.
That was their story. Maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. But tonight, when the lights go out, just remember, not every silence means you're alone. New true horror stories every week. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have a story of your own, send it to us. You're not the only one who's seen things.